This is Steve Colano, and this is Confidential Remarks. Think about how we hail a ride, watch a movie, or pay a friend today versus 10 years ago. Almost every major industry has rewritten its rulebook to fit a digital-first world. Yet in real estate, despite a flood of new apps and listing platforms, the underlying financial engine hasn't moved. Percentage-based commissions and mandatory fee structures look almost identical to the ones used before the internet existed. It raises a specific question. In an era where we have a dozen digital alternatives for nearly every transaction, why do these particular fees stay frozen in place? These costs endure because they are protected by an invisible system of industry gatekeeping. They don't survive by offering superior value. They survive by making themselves appear inevitable. This system relies on a baseline psychological state called condition white. For most buyers, sellers, and agents, this is the default. You operate within the inherited model, pay the standard rates, and assume the process works this way because there is no other way for it to work. Control is maintained not through locked doors, but through the careful curation of what options appear possible. If alternative pathways are kept out of sight, the default path feels like a natural law rather than a policy. This invisibility serves as the industry's primary defense. When consumers are unaware that their choices are being restricted, the capacity to resist those restrictions never develops. The most persistent risk in a transaction isn't the price of the home. It's the silent infrastructure of unquestioned rules that direct your financial choices without your direct consent. This compliance eventually hits a wall of friction. It often starts with a single line item, a mandatory charge that seems entirely disconnected from any actual value you received during the process. That friction leads to condition yellow. This is the awakening phase. A fee that once seemed standard now looks like a red flag, prompting you to ask why your options are limited by industry custom rather than logic. The immediate industry response to these questions is to frame alternatives as dangerous or unprofessional. The goal is to use complexity as a deterrent, pulling the individual back toward the safety of the default path. But if the questions continue, the illusion of inevitability breaks. You begin to see that you are interacting with a design system, one that can be analyzed, challenged, and eventually bypassed. Simply asking why changes your role in the market. You are no longer a passive participant. You have become an active variable in a system that requires your silence to function. In Condition Orange, you identify gatekeeping as it happens. The maze becomes clear, distinguishing between hurdles required by law and those erected by industry custom. You now evaluate models based on fit, comparing the rigid percentage-based commission against modular flat fee or advisory-only services. The industry's architecture reveals a clear pattern. Paths leading back to legacy models are smoothly paved, while every path leading away is marked with artificial warnings and administrative speed bumps. This structural clarity shifts the behavior of both consumers and agents. Rather than defending the old rules, they begin to map out and test new routes that bypass traditional bottlenecks. Frustration has been replaced by preparation. You are no longer just aware of the gates. You are building the tools to move around them. Condition Red is the phase where preparation turns into action. This isn't about protesting the old system. It's about utilizing the alternatives that the old system tried to keep hidden. This looks like consumers opting out of traditional MLS channels, or selecting unbundled service models that allow them to pay only for the specific expertise they need. This dashboard represents the actual tools of Condition Red. These platforms prioritize transparent data and direct alignment between cost and service, providing a functional replacement for legacy infrastructure. This stage is defined by agency. It is the realization that if the current model doesn't serve your interests, you have the ability to utilize a better one. This distribution shows how a shift in awareness changes market dynamics. While most participants start on the left, an increase in the number of people reaching the prepared stage creates a new center of gravity for the entire industry. Changing the industry doesn't require a total conversion of every buyer and seller. It only requires making this level of awareness the new default expectation for a transaction. Legacy systems that depend on standardized compliance become fragile when those standards are questioned. Power moves from those who control the gates to those who realize the gates aren't necessary. Once you see the invisible infrastructure for what it is, it loses its leverage. The only thing left to do is make a choice. You can continue through the gate, or you can just walk around it. This has been Confidential Remarks.